Alfonso De Lima is an unsung political hero who put country before self. Education formed a strong part of his life.
I was born in Trinidad and Tobago in 1939, August 20th. I went to St. Joseph Convent as a little fellow. Then I went to St. Mary's College, and as I grew older, I went to Belmont Intermediate, and then from there I ended up in Mount Seminary College.
Alfonso showed passion and strong leadership in his political career.
You know, it was novel to see how he performed. Yeah. You know, he had, there was another man in the parliament, and he was afraid when he see the speaker with his robe and so on. But Alfonso never, he was a brave fellow.
He was not a person given to flights of oratory and that sort of thing. But when he spoke from the heart, and you know, that comes over. You can tell when you are listening to somebody whether you are speaking to someone who is just uttering rhetoric or one who is sincere. He spoke from the heart, and that was always very evident. He was also a person with a military inclination, military in the sense that he was a cadet force officer and then subsequently the volunteer defense force. That, in other words, he's a man given to service at virtually at all levels.
Mr. De Lima, how did you get into politics?
I was never involved in any political party as a young man. I only got involved after the 1970 incident that we had here. I was involved with the Army Cadet Force in those days, because we had no army. Well, the army had just come in, I think a year or so before. And when we had this, how could I say, Black Power uprising in the 70s, then I was sort of pulled into what was called the protective services at that time. And as a young second lieutenant, I found myself down at police headquarters in charge of the radio with a police inspector by the name of Anthony Prospect, who was the police bandmaster. And I spent most of my, when Dr. Williams declared the state of emergency, I spent most of my time there. I practically lived there.
A phone call came in for Lieutenant De Lima. He was a cadet force lieutenant at the time. And he answered the phone, so he said, speaking. And he said they were calling from the Prime Minister's residence to say that 4 soldiers turned up there for duty, claiming they were sent by Lieutenant De Lima. So they called for Lieutenant De Lima to come to check whether he in fact sent 4 soldiers there. He said, I know nothing about them, arrest those men. And obviously they were taken into detention. I'm not sure that I know how it turned out. But I suspect that must really have impressed Dr. Williams, because that was 1970. By 71, he was asked to be a candidate.
I was called by Dr. Williams to come and see him, and he asked me if I would come into politics and serve at a higher level. I told him, well, I wasn't really too interested in that, because I had much preferred the Army Cadet Force and what I was doing there at that time.
When the matter was first raised with him, he said, but I'm not a politician, I'm not given to that. But, you know, Dr. Williams felt that given his presence of mind and given his sense of being able to size up things very quickly and, in a sense, very accurately, this was a good man to have.
Nevertheless, he said, well, you wouldn't lose any of your ranks or anything like that. And so I happened to end up serving the first 5 years with PNM in the Northeast constituency. And then I ended up doing another 5-year stint with them. And when he died, then I decided that was the end of my political career.
Alfonso served not as a minister, but from the backbench.
You have many backbenchers in the parliament. If you have 24 members, you will not have everybody as ministers. He was a businessman. I don't think he wanted any ministerial duties. He wanted to remain a backbencher.
When Dr. Williams approached him to be a candidate, he was reluctant. He said, I'm not a politician. And you know, I mean, he did not feel that that was the way in which his life was cut out. He saw himself as a person who served, who is, you know, as a businessman, part of the family tradition, but as a people-centered person, quite happy to serve people. And this is reflected in the way in which he devoted his time while in politics to the service of his constituents. It wasn't a question that he wanted to become a minister or a parliamentary secretary and was not chosen. That was really never his inclination. So there's no reflection on the fact that he wasn't.
How did Dr. Eric Williams influence you?
Dr. Williams is a fantastic teacher, aside from what people may have to say. And I really learned a lot from him that served me very well throughout the balance of my life.
Well, I think almost anybody who has worked with Dr. Williams has been touched by Dr. Williams. His approach influenced almost everyone who came into contact with him. He was a tremendous nationalist, and he put his country and his region first, and we are products of that, both Mr. De Lima and myself.
I ended up as counseling people. I ended up helping people in all different sorts of ways. Whatever money they paid me in Parliament, I would give it to the constituency to buy school books for some of these mothers that have 5 and 6 children, right, that have no money to buy no food. The fathers are not there, they're gone away and all that, right? And all those things I really enjoyed.
A man of the people, for the people.
Alfonso was a very, very good member of Parliament. He was very, very concerned about his constituents. In the speeches that he made in Parliament, he made it clear that he looked upon the interests of his constituents as a very important matter.
Every representative of the people have different approaches, but I know that once a week he used to go to his constituency office, and the people of that area went to see him. In addition to that, he had a business, and people used to come to meet him there. He was a very approachable man and a very friendly fellow, so people never complained about him as they do with others and say, well, he doesn't see me and he don't. Whatever they come to him, he will take note of it, and he will act on it.
In politics, he spent more of his time servicing his constituency. And since he has left politics, he has maintained that tradition on a wider front through his connections with the Living Waters community. Merely to tell you that is to tell you the kind of activity he engages in.
I admire a lot of the stuff that he's done. I respect a lot of the stuff that he's done, and I kind of strive to be as good as he has been in his life. And what I've seen in setting up and helping Living Waters community and getting and doing his part to get it to where it is today, and waking up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to Duncan Street to feed poor sick people. And he would come back with the greatest stories of their lives, and those are the things that I admire in life. Not what you have accomplished, but who you have helped.
The man, Alfonso De Lima.
I found him to be a very, very humble person, and someone who always gave people the respect which was due to them.
He is not one of those given to making the headlines and having his name in their papers, but a country can't really be a stable, peaceful country with respecting the institutions of the country if you don't have people like that who serve out of a desire to serve rather than those who serve in order for their own self-aggrandizement. He was a man of service rather than a man of self-aggrandizement, and I think that is perhaps one of the better contributions to the development of Trinidad and Tobago that any person can make.
He was such a nice fellow that everybody spoke well of him. And the constituency that he represented, they always liked him, and it is of his choice that he didn't go back for election. But he was a very good man, and I must say that we were lucky to have him in Parliament. I wish we had some more like him.
When asked what advice he would give to an upcoming politician, he said,
Be straight with your constituents, be honest with them, and try to do as much as you could possibly do for your constituency. And never give up on them, because without them, you're nowhere. They are your bosses. You know, we are not their boss.